And it seems we are live. Hello, everybody. Let me switch everything up and open my... So I opened the chat and here it is. So how is everybody? I was too lazy for updating to update the calendar, so here's what you get. So today we are talking about classes in JavaScript, and we are talking about some designs about REST API. So the problem with REST APIs is that if you don't plan them in advance, they become really unwieldy, and there's a lot of endpoints that are not doing anything and similar stuff like that. So, okay. So, hello. Hey, Daniel. So let's go first through some classes. So first, if you haven't downloaded already, there is a GitHub on CroCoder Dev Lockdown Learning, which I'll paste here. You can download as a zip or SSH it to your, or git clone it through SSH on your PC and put it everything that you need here. Also, you can always fork it. I've seen that the usual people have already forked this repo, and you can push then back to your forked repo, so you can have your own version of solutions and other things. So let's go to our classes folder. As you can see here, it's totally empty. There's only git keep. We can delete now the git keep and put there and script.js or index.js or something like that. So index.js naming is really popular in node.js because node.js accepts index.js as the default JavaScript file in the folder, similar to index.html. So yeah, we can use script or index or whatever you really like here. So there are some, so classes in JavaScript are not really classes as in objective programming languages like Java and C#. I won't go deep in there. How are they working in JavaScript and what's really the difference between like other programming languages and JavaScript. I will just show you when they're useful classes in JavaScript. Like most thing in JavaScript you can do normally with functions. So JavaScript is really it's not really a functional programming language, but you can do everything with functions. You don't need classes to do stuff. You can create objects as is. So imagine classes are really just a schema for our objects. Let's say it like that. So when a class is initialized, it actually becomes an object. So we can describe something in JavaScript and then call it with a new operator to get that, create a new object. So let me demonstrate it. So remember our object, so person with name is David and surname is Abram and age is 30. So remember this. We can describe it like this. So the problem here is when we don't want to create a new person, we need to define it again, similar like this, and so on and so on. And if we define two different people, so let me get this, and let's put John Smith. You can define X different people like this. You can always define it in an array or something like that with map and reduce and create everything, create the objects here. But what if we want to create, I don't know, let's say a person greets somebody. So when we want to do something like, I don't know, how to explain it best. Let's say we need a function which will say for each person, like David says hello or John says hello or something like that. So imagine we have a function here which is a greet function, and what we need to do now is actually pass a person and a person, and after that we just return person.name says hello, and we can call it like this. So let me console log it and say greet person, and also greet, and we can run this. So there's a little bit of code here. Let me excuse me. Oh man. So let's go here and run script.js. What there is wrong? Oh, here is return. Okay, so this greet function, what it does, it actually takes a person object and it says person.name says hello. So this is so the problem with this is just an awful way of writing the code. So the better way would be for each person to have its own function, and then you can call it without any problem. So imagine it like this, and you can write it in JavaScript just like this. So I can see something like this, and you can return whatever you like here. So this is just another way of writing this, but the problem here is you cannot really access the name of the person here. So in here you cannot really, I can try, let's try that. Let's try to get this name, or even let's try to get maybe other time. So let's try first this. So person.greet, we should call the function here, and actually says some problem because name is not defined. Okay, let's try person.name. Actually, it doesn't return anything, so it returns undefined or empty string or something like that, because person is defined here. At this moment, the person is defined, but there is nothing like in the variable name. So yeah, there is really no great way of writing this that we want to do here. So this function greet is fine if you know that here is always passed a person, and you cannot really access the properties here from this function that we passed as a property. So this is actually a property that is a function, and you can really solve this with classes. So this type of writing in JavaScript, if you need it sometimes, is really easily done with classes. So let me show you. Let's do it here. So for defining class, you just need to use keyword class. That's pretty straightforward. Define a person here, and you can, after that, call something like this. We can console log. Oh, not like this, but a new. I forgot the new keyword. So you imagine this to be a schema of a person, and this is our initialization from the variable. So this variable David will become a new person object. So if we console log this, we will actually get something printed out. we can try it. So open the terminal and write down node script.js. What's the problem here? Oh, I haven't entered the, let me change to this, and node script. Okay, so you see here that it prompted out an empty object that actually has like person. It knows that is a class of a type person. So, or it's an object of a class person. So let's try to do type of David. Run this again. You can see that it says it's an object because it's a really easy an object, and you can see that value of it, it's an empty object, but something is telling us here person. And if we go deeper in this, like through computer science C, going there more, you'll see that there is something called prototype and so on and so on, and it's not really interested even to computer scientists. So I will totally I will just ignore it totally at this point. So let's try to print out person and type of person. Let's see what's going on in here. You can see that person is actually a function and type of person is a function. So here we go in the first a main problem in JavaScript, like everything is a function. Even classes are a function. You won't find any other language that defines classes or structures or anything as functions. So thank you, creators of JavaScript. This is really random for defining here, because like classes weren't this first batch. The JavaScript was designed, classes were nowhere to be found, and classes are like added like later, much later, and they were added like totally randomly, and they're useful. I will show you for what they're useful, but they are like, you can just ignore them if you like and not use them if you don't like them. That's about it. Okay, but let's try to see why are they useful. So the first thing here, what we can do is actually right here like a constructor. So constructor, whenever we call new and person, constructor will be called. So we can test this out. We can write here console log and hello constructor is called. So let's try. You can see here that hello constructor is called, and then our console log here returns an empty person object. So what we can do here, we can actually do here pretty cool stuff, something like this. We can pass in constructor a parameter and then use something called this. What this does is actually says store in a new object that's creating of a type of class, like new object that's created of class person, store the name parameter inside its own property called name. So let's try to run this. You can see here that we haven't passed any name, but the new object has something like name undefined. And if you pass here like David, you can see that our new person object has a name, a property name that's called David. That's cool. So this is like the first thing why classes are useful. So we can create different constructors for each our class, and we can pass some parameters in there. So for our example, you can use surname, you can use age, and then you can say something like this. This age equals age. So Abram, and we say 30. Yeah, and it creates a new object. So this is pretty straightforward and not really super useful, because we can always create an object just like this. So why to create everything like this? We can create always something like this. Okay, but I've shown you that we can't really create great function that references somehow person, or it's like a property inside of a person that you can call through it. So you can create that inside of classes. So if you want to have something in here, you just write like this. So let's say greet return. So again, we are calling the this. So this actually references the name that we passed in params. And actually, greet is useful really in this example. This is useful in this example because in greet function, we can actually access the name inside of our new object that's created with new keyword. These type of functions or these type of properties inside of object are called methods. So if you have an object that you call it with, I don't know, david.greet, the greet is actually a method. So we can try it here, call something with greet, and you can see when we call, it says down here, David says hello. So let me create also John here. This is all pretty basic, and this is not really like that much hard or that much useful, but I will show you another thing, another example where classes are great. So yeah, David says hello, John says hello. You can always access multiple different properties. So I'm age, something like this, and it says, oops, sorry, I haven't put this before it. And it says, David says hello, I'm 30, John says hello, I'm 35. That's pretty good. So you can see here we can define like multiple methods inside of a class and then call them and access their properties. So when they become an object right here, you can access, you can try, see here, David dot, there is something name, we can access the name, same as any object. We can access the greet method, and it works pretty fine. You just need to remember to call new before your class initialization, your object initialization. It's not the class we define. So class is actually a schema, but you can actually inherit from one class to another class, like the methods and also the constructor. So what we can do here is actually add a new class called, let's say, coder. And we can actually write here something that's called extends person. So what this does is actually our coder will inherit all the constructors, or you can only have one constructor, but fine, the constructor and all the methods from the person. So what we can do here is actually write, instead of person, coder. And you can see here, if I call this, what's the problem here? Throw error, node index, module not found. Oh, again. Okay, so what this does is actually the coder class inherits all from person class. if we want to add something like, let's say, favorite language, favorite programming language, so we can add a constructor here which have a name, surname, age, and favorite lang. What we can do actually is access the favorite, like create a new this favorite lang, its favorite lang. But we want to do these assignments also here. So what we need to do is actually call just super and paste their surname and age. So the super will call the constructor from the class that we inherited everything from there. So you can try it. So it works. Must call super constructor like first. Must call super in the right class before accessing this. So the other way around. I always forget. So super should be first always. So yeah. And what we can do here is actually add a new function that it says say lang, and you can return my favorite lang is. So also we can David right here, David.sayLang. And now if we add here JavaScript written properly, what we get here is David says hello, I'm 30, my favorite lang is JavaScript. John says hello, I'm 35. You can see here now that David gained favorite lang property and say lang method. So that's about it from classes, at least from like how they're written and so on. They can be like extended, or they have some inheritance in there, and you can use them as any other object, but you have an additional methods here, so that's pretty cool. But that's about it. Like classes in JavaScript are not really like first-class citizens. Oh, is there some problem with the stream? So there were some spikes in here, so yeah, it seems that everything is back to normal. There were some spikes with the internet, so there's still some spikes. Really strange. I hope somebody hasn't accessed my Wi-Fi and now it's downloading something like huge. Okay, but fine. So these are classes. I won't say that I'm not using them in JavaScript, but they're really like in some really specific places. Let's say it like that. And if you go through my code, you probably won't, like that's like available online. You will find classes maybe in React when I'm writing them, and that's about it. They're really interesting things in like C# and Java or C++, but in JavaScript it's like they're here, they exist, good to know. Okay, that's about it. But let's go to the part that's really interesting, and that's again REST API. So for a backend developer, REST API is something I would say like the most important thing. So up until now, the REST API had no alternatives. There is something that came in like last few years, and that's called GraphQL. So GraphQL is just a different kind of API than REST. You actually just describe your data and send the big descriptions of data. GraphQL is pretty popular today. In React community is really popular because it goes really great with React. But still, like the most projects that I worked on, they're still using REST APIs, like without like straightforward. So let me get just a minute a break just to see if my router is doing something strange because I got really bad spikes here. So let me just a second because I need to. Okay, be right back. Hello, I'm back. So no, the internet is just having a fit today. So okay, so GraphQL pretty popular, pretty fine. There are some problems when designing GraphQL. It's the same, almost the same problems that you have with REST APIs. Maybe there is there are some good things about GraphQL, and maybe in future when we're working on React or something like that, I can show you how to use GraphQL. It's pretty simple actually. The problem is when you're working on backend with GraphQL, there's a lot of issues there, and you need to be really careful when getting the data and so on. But the same thing could be problems in REST APIs. So okay, but let's go back to our REST APIs. So the first thing that I want to discuss with you is actually what we get back from the server. So HTTP status codes are actually the codes that we're getting from HTTP requests. So remember, when everything is totally fine, we got 200, and we get some error, we got 400 or 500 error. So let's go through 200 errors. So I would advise you to use these 3 different HTTP responses on the backend when some request is done. So the first thing is everything is awesome. So everything works okay. It's 200 and it's actually translated to okay. 202 is accepted. That's useful when you have something as asynchronous that's working on the backend, and maybe it's not done when we returned the response. So it says like the request is totally fine, everything went fine, but the code in the backend is still working on something, or at least I'm not sure if it's done already. So 204 is when you're returning like an empty message, so without any JSON or without any text that's returning, you just put 204 with no content. That's really useful when you're deleting like a resource. So let's say delete a person, and it actually says, okay, everything's fine, 204, but I returned no content. Okay, for 400, you don't need to know this by heart. I will show you on Saturday when they're useful, when they're not, and most of times you can just ignore them and use 200. So 200 is like a catch-all. The problem in there is actually you should be really like worthy with your HTTP. You really want to send as much explanations to the front end as you can. So HTTP status codes are really great in doing that, because 202, okay, fine, but I cannot expect the data is still like in the database, or at least this request is not done. And 204 means, okay, I shouldn't expect any like data to be returned from server when I get to 104. So 400 are client errors, 500 server errors. So when somebody returns you 400, it actually means that your request, your JSON, your search parameters, or query string that you send to the server is just not there. So something like is missing or malformed, or you send some object that is totally like random, like why did you send me this JSON object? So yeah, so that's malformed request. 401 is when you're not authorized to get that data. 402 is my favorite one because it's payment required. At least the client hasn't paid for using my REST API or something like that. So this is not really useful in like most cases. But if you're trying to sell your API to some other client, let's say Google Map API, so that's pretty common. And if you haven't paid, like there is no money, it will just say payment required. Like there is no enough credits on your Google account or something like that. So that means payment required. Also, there was a 403, like forbidden. Like it means like you're not allowed to call this. It's different from unauthorized, because forbidden could be also, let's say, when you create two different users and you're allowed only to create one. So this will return 403. You can't create like two users. You need to delete one user to create another one. Or you get like, I don't know, an example, like you can have 10 users in your is there a problem with stream? You're getting this great or no? Because it's really like awkward to see like everything going into red because my upload speed is awful. I'm really not sure what's happening. So 4.3 is like if you have 10 different yeah, okay, then it's only my OBS going crazy. So 4.3 is, let's say you can have 10 users and you're trying to create 11th user. So this should be like forbidden. You can add another user. And 404, the famous 404, is there's nothing on this endpoint. Like 404 is pretty much like a meme at this point, because whenever you get like Google something random in Google, you'll get actually 404. Let's actually not use the Peugeot 404, but HTTP 404, and you get like different. You already seen this, like 404 not found, some funny image or something like that. Yeah. So 404 is pretty useful when there is no resource with that ID, or there is nothing on that endpoint. Let's say you're trying to access, I don't know, /plants, and on this API doesn't, like plants are not existing endpoint. So you just return to the client 404. So 500, the next one, are server errors. Like 500 means like something happened on a server, like something is broken, something doesn't work properly. 503 means the service is unavailable, like that means like everything is fine that you sent to us, but we have shut down this endpoint, or this REST API is not working properly. And 504, it means gateway timeout. It means that the request was processing too long. So imagine that you have some code in backend and your front end expects something to be done in 1 minute, and it goes longer than 1 minute, and before the end of that minute, you return to the client, hey, this takes too long. You should do something with that. I'm not sure. But 504 is pretty useful when there is long processing or a long request in there. So, okay. And yep. And the other thing is HTTP methods. We already talked about that. The CRUD operations is like get, post, put, patch, and delete. The one different thing that I wanted to show you is that actually post can create a resource or collection of resources. Sometimes it's really useful to create like 10 users in a batch. Like here is the all, like if I can create 10 users, here's all 10 users. Or I can update everything. So let's say that I want to change their organizations because we changed the name. So change from, I don't know, some company to CroCoder or something like that. And delete is somewhere, just a second. And delete is sometimes useful. To be like, so you can delete a whole collection of resources. The one caveat here is that you need to send like multiple IDs or something in the query, and I will show you how to do that. Just let me, okay. So let's talk about CRUD endpoints. So most of your endpoints will be CRUD. Some endpoints would be, so CRUD means that you're creating, reading, updating, or deleting something. There is sometimes a need to do everything from here, or some operation that's like transactional. You can imagine like in web shops. Web shops are a great example because you need to. Let's say you want to buy, I don't know, some clothes or like a cool t-shirt, let's say like that. So what you want to do is actually create an endpoint when I say, okay, buy this. So our server need to talk to some payment provider or something like that. And if there's some money on your bank account, you need to check that. And after that, it returns something to the server and change some data because you just bought a t-shirt and there is an order for a t-shirt and it returns back to the user. So in some situations, like your endpoint won't be CRUD because this is like does everything. But for beginners, like understanding like REST API CRUD endpoints is very important because you can design those CRUD endpoints in really like awful ways and you create in like great ways. This is all just advice. This is not really like you need to do this in this way. You just need to like this is only advice. This is only like a norm in a programming world. So let's go to first. So this will be our data collection. This is pretty like usual for us. The only thing that we changed, we added IDs. So in our collections, every item in there should have an ID. And you will see why. Similar to JSON server, this is like one-to-one. So imagine this is our data collection. So /person should, what it should do, if you send a GET request, we should get a person or multiple people. In post, we should create a new person or multiple people. In put patch, updates a person or multiple people. And deletes a person or multiple people. Everything is happening on /person. The only difference is what HTTP verb are we using to change or get some data from the person endpoint. So let's talk about get person. I created like usual endpoints and create them only if needed. So the usual endpoints that you always want to create is actually /person and /person/ let's say 1. In this example, it actually returns all users. It returns all persons or all people. Okay, fine. I wrote here wrong. Okay, I will fix this. /person returns all people, and it returns 200 if that's if this like goes well. If there is some error like 400 to 500, if it's a client error, it like, I don't know how it will happen here, a client error, but maybe 500 if server is like overloaded or you can access this collection or something like that. /person/1 returns one person with ID 1. So return 200 if everything's fine, and if there is no person with ID 1, you return 404. And create them only if needed. So the problem with these endpoints are you can have as much endpoints as you have properties, because you can see here person/name/David should actually return a user with name, or all users with name David. Or you can like create it like this, so /person and then query string name equals David. The problem with this, you shouldn't create them if they are not useful in the front end. These ones are pretty standard and pretty like usual. And the problem with these ones are just if some front-end developer, or you in this case, maybe you're creating backend and front-end, needs to query our collection by person name, then you should create this endpoint. And that's pretty straightforward. We already like seen this type of endpoints. Let me use a pointer. This kind of endpoints in JSON server, right? So this is pretty cool. Let's go to delete. Next point is delete. So the usual endpoint is actually you should just pass an ID. So person/ID, and deletes a person with ID 1. 204. So remember 204 is no content. My battery just died on my camera. Great. Everything is going fine today. Like my internet is on fire and my camera is empty. Battery is empty. Everything's fine. So 204, remember, is no content, because when you delete a person, you shouldn't like expect any data to go back. In our example with get, we actually return a person data or person object. And if there is no existing project with ID, you should probably return 404. So if we try to delete person 6 and we only have ID 1 and 2, it should probably delete 404. So if you need to delete multiple persons, multiple people like this, so /person and ID is 1, 2, and 3, you can create it like this, or create them like this. So in this example, you need to parse this into an array in the backend, and like if you send it like this, like Express and most different REST APIs frameworks will understand what you meant. So in this example, they will create an array with 1, 2, and 3. But in this example, the array could have some frameworks could sort this differently. So you maybe get an array with 2, 3, 1, or 3, 2, 1, or 1, 2, 3. So the position of each item in the array that will happen in the backend, maybe it could be random here. And in this example, you will have the same order in array. So that's about delete and get. So when you're getting something from server, use 200, and when you're getting an no content response, use 204. This is pretty popular in some frameworks. In JavaScript, these are more popular to be used. So just so you know. Then let's go to post. So what you actually need to do is call person, and you send an object. Here, next ID. Oh man, I wrote this in a hurry. So creates an user again, and user with next ID. So the next ID, I meant really this the next in the sequence, because you can see that we have here person with ID 1 and person with ID 2. If we add a new person, it will have ID 3. You should probably return the object back with 200 because ID is generated backend, and you should probably have on front end something like ID, so you can query like get with ID, so you can delete it because you know what's the ID and so on. So when posting, you create always a new user. So if we post this like 6 times in a row, we will get 6 different objects in our collection with ID like 3 to like 8. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, that's 6 people. So yeah, and always don't forget to return object back, because this is just a really nice, clean way of getting ID back to a front end without like querying again all the people that we have in the collection. So okay, so put, I prefer put than patch for updating. So put person actually creates or updates a user with next ID. So the problem with put is if you pass something like ID or something like that, it should probably update the item with that ID in the collection. But if you don't push them with ID, it should probably create a user. And this is a big problem with put in HTTP REST API, because it's not really defined great. Let's say like that. Because put could be used for creating and updating. And here is now, yeah. So you need to define, if we pass ID, it should probably be updated. If we don't, then it should be created. Again, return the object back to user, as ID could be generated in backend. And here it should be said it needs to have no ID inside of object. So if put create something, it should probably have ID undefined or non-existent property here. And this works pretty well. Okay, so this is just like a really easy example, because we have just like really shallow collection. We don't have like no arrays like properties here or something like that, or no object properties. We only have like simple definition. So we probably would just need to define get, post, put, and delete, and we should actually just need to take this norm or advice and use it to create a great endpoint for creating people or users in my, because I probably changed it in the last second to person. So what if you have something like this? So a little bit like a bit more complex data collection. So imagine that we have some pets. So I have 2 cats, Thor and Rhea, and I put it in a pets array property. And also John has some pets like Snoopy, and it's a dog. In this example, we can always create /pet endpoint. It should work the same as person. That's why I haven't changed this. Again. And here. So /pet should be the same as the person endpoint. Just don't forget that the pet is defined inside of an user object, and we should probably return own ID every time we get some data from the pet. So imagine that we will return here is a pet with ID 1, it's named Thor, species a cat, and owner ID is 1. So we can connect the person David Abram to the Torcat pet. Yeah. But we can add some additional endpoints to person. So if you have something like an array or inside of property, we should probably have some endpoints like this. So person/1/pets, and should return all the user pets. And 200, 400, and 500, the usual stuff. Person1/pet/2 returns a single user pet, so or person pet, and that is pretty straightforward. So person/1/pets. There could be some upgrade to our /person/name/David endpoint, so we can actually add /pets after that, but that gets really confusing, and you should probably avoid doing that. These two are pretty usual endpoints. If we know like ID from person and want to get all pets, this is pretty straightforward thing. The other thing is when we are creating some person with post or put in our example here, we should return all. Again, this is, let's ignore this for a moment. What the usual endpoint here, we can define like some added stuff here, and in Saturday we will do exactly this. So we can have two ways of creating persons now with pets IDs. So we can say an array of pets ID, and David Abram, the new object that we create in our data collection, will actually have like 5 different pets that are again already created. So it will get the pet with ID 1, with the ID 2, ID 3, ID 4, and ID 5, and add it to the person here. Or alternatively, we can always add a new object, like a pet object, and it will be created parallelly with the new user here. So this is about it. So these are some advice for creating REST APIs. Just just in theory, how to create it, how to be readable, and like so somebody can use them without any problem, and it should like understand, like if there is a person collection, I could query it like this. So on Saturday we will actually create some REST APIs, and we'll create a crude REST API similar to this that I'm describing here, and our data collection will be something like this. So it will have some like properties that have that will have array properties in there, and I will show you of a few ways of storing this data inside JSON at this point. In the future, it will be in the database, and you will understand, when you understand databases, you will understand why we should store in our JSON like differently or something like that. So, is there any questions? So I need to double check because I hope that everything went fine, because my software is telling me that I had a lot of dropped frames, and it seems that my internet is just crazy slow today. Okay. So any questions? Any confusion about that? Any like non-related questions about this? This was really fast. I just went through it because I will be referencing this in Saturday. So you just know what are the advantages of doing this like this, because it's like we try to streamline it as as much as possible. The problem with like a lot of REST APIs that I seen and used are they try to have their own way of creating designing REST APIs, and mostly it just confuses the users. So that's about it. I just want to create something that's useful to everybody, and whenever they see documentation, they will understand, oh, it's pretty simple. I just use /person/ID and so on and so on. So we'll go back to this and we will probably... Okay, so I'll explain. So Viera asked me, I prefer using put. So I will just show you this. So I'll use the great Wikipedia page because it's totally fine. What it says here, at least from as I know, it's totally correct. So the problem with the HTTP verbs that are used today, they haven't been meant to be used in this particular way. So the problem here is put and patch are used interchangeable today in most REST APIs. For me, put is, you can see here, the put method request that the enclosed entity be stored under the supplied URI. If the URI refers to already existing resource, it is modified. If the URI does not point to existing resource, the server can create a resource with that URI. Put was meant to be used as an create/update thing. Patch is meant to be like apply some partial modification to a resource. So patch shouldn't be used for creating some object in our data collection, but only like modifying it partially. So patch is really like misunderstood verb in HTTP. Like most of the thing, like put is enough. The problem here is also with something called idempotency. So yeah, you can see here. So there are some unsafe and non-idempotent methods, and there are some safe idempotent methods, and so on, so on. Let's not go deep in there. Idempotency means that if we send the same request multiple times, they should return the same stuff, or they shouldn't return the same stuff. Long story, but just so know, post is used for creating things. Put is mostly using for updating things. But if we miss something or there is not existing resource there, we should probably create it with put also. Yeah, that's about it. I wouldn't go like deeper into those because there is also like head, options, connect, trace, and so on. For me, patch is I would say a big no-no. Just don't use it. For me it creates more problems than it tries to solve. So I use mostly like just get, post, put, and delete. This is mostly just because they were creating in this way. You can, the problem here, these are just norms. So you can probably just create a get, like you can delete with get method, and we can create with get method, and you can like update with get method, but and it should work totally fine, and like most of frameworks will have no problems with that. But in this way of getting, posting, like if using getting, post, put, and delete, you are creating a different verb for every letter in CRUD operation. So with get we are reading, with post we are creating, with put we are updating, and with delete we are deleting. So you get some, let's say, just clarity inside your REST API. I've seen multiple like REST APIs that are only using get, and like from big companies. Like Google had a notorious API that only used get requests. It was a straight awful. They refactored it and they added like new verbs, but it was crazy. Like it was totally awful. Yeah, that's about it. Yeah, no problem, Vera. So yeah, I use put. So for CRUD, like reading, creating, updating, and deleting. Patch is really questionable for me. Maybe somebody can like explain me like when patch is really useful and when you should use patch over put, but I really just can't see any benefit of using patch. And like there is a lot of people that are saying that I just don't use patch. So this is like a mainstream opinion. It's not like my crazy opinion. Yeah. So if there is no more question, I will be off. I need to do some work for Saturday because we will be creating some REST APIs on Saturday, and we will be storing our data in JSON files. We already know how to use file API in node.js, so that shouldn't be a big problem. The only thing that's missing from your knowledge now is databases or some way of storing the data in relational or non-relational databases. So that could be the next thing to be for be explained. But there is a lot more of Node.js like stuff to be done. So I'll see what's better for the next week, and I will update it and send you the calendar. So we'll be live on Saturday. Yeah, if you haven't liked or subscribed already, it helps me a lot if you do that. So thank you very much. I'm waving, but the camera is not working. So see you on Saturday. Bye.